I always believed I had everything: a prestigious job in a New York financial corporation, an office with a panoramic view of skyscrapers, subordinates who looked at me with admiration, and a wardrobe of suits that highlighted my confidence. Yet every morning, when I looked at my reflection in the elevator mirror, I didn't see a powerful woman, I saw a stranger with weary, faded eyes. I worked 16 hours a day, spent weekends in conference rooms, and couldn't even remember the last time I had laughed sincerely. When a doctor told me I was burned out, I smiled. In my world, that was almost considered a sign of success. But at night, lying in my apartment alone, I felt like I was suffocating. One day a colleague suggested joining a trip to California. Just reset. The ocean works wonders, he said. I shrugged it off, not believing in miracles. And yet something stirred inside me. A week later, I was standing on the shore of Malibu. The salty, wild wind struck my chest harder than any dose of adrenaline, the sun burned my shoulders, and before me stretched an endless ocean. I inhaled deeply and, for the first time in months, felt like I was alive again. That was when I saw him. A man walking barefoot along the beach, tanned, carrying a surfboard under his arm. His hair was tousled by the wind, his smile so easy that it seemed like he knew a secret the rest of us had forgotten. He looked at me and asked, "First time in Malibu?" I nodded, barely breathing, and in that instant, something inside me shifted. I had promised myself, just 1 week. 7 days to rest, to regain strength, and then back to New York, back to reports, clients, meetings, and the grind. But by the second day, I realized my promise was already under threat. Liam appeared everywhere, on the beach, in a roadside cafe, even in the parking lot where he teased me that my rented car looked like it belonged in an office garage. He offered to teach me how to surf. I refused at first, citing my workload, my fear of drowning. He only smiled. "You're not afraid of water, Sophie. You're afraid of losing control." And those words pierced me. He was right. I had always controlled everything: numbers, schedules, employees, even my own emotions. That morning, I climbed onto the board for the first time. The wave lifted me, and in a second I crashed down, water engulfing me, salt burning my throat. I resurfaced coughing, humiliated. But he laughed, not mockingly, but with such warmth that I couldn't help laughing too. Again and again, I fell, and again, he was there to help me up, saying, "Don't fight. Listen to the wave." His words dug deeper than I cared to admit. That evening he invited me to a bonfire with his friends. We sat barefoot in the sand, music drifting from a guitar, the smell of smoke and salt in the air. Nobody asked me who I was or how much I earned. They just talked, laughed, lived. For the first time in years, I forgot about work emails, forgotten deadlines, the endless New York pace. There were only waves, firelight, and his gaze that warmed me more than the flames. The days passed so quickly they seemed to dissolve into one another. The sun rose, and we went down to the ocean. I stood on the board again and again, only to fall, swallowing salt water, while Liam laughed and shouted encouragement. "You're still too clever for this," he teased. And I hated that he was right. I was always trying to outthink the ocean instead of feeling it. At night we went to small beach bars with live music, drank cheap beer from plastic cups, and danced barefoot in the sand. His friends accepted me as if I'd always been part of their circle. I began to forget my old life. But reminders kept flashing on my phone. Flight tomorrow at 9 a.m. My suitcase was packed. My business suit lay folded neatly for my first post-vacation meeting. I stared at it and thought, could I really wear that again? That evening Liam and I sat in silence on the beach. He held my hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Stay," he whispered. Just one word, but it shook my world more than any deal I had ever signed. I should have said no. I should have boarded that plane. But that night I canceled the flight. My hands trembled as I pressed confirm, but it felt strangely easy. I stayed. Not for a day. For the summer. And as fear coiled in my chest, I knew I had just leapt into darkness without knowing what awaited me. That summer became a dream I never wanted to wake from. Mornings began not with alarms and conference calls, but with waves breaking against the shore. We sat on the sand, sipping coffee from a thermos, watching the sunrise. His little beach house was modest, far from luxurious, but filled with warmth, music, and the scent of the ocean in every corner. During the day, we drove his battered van along the coast, music blasting, wind whipping my hair. We ate mangoes with juice running down our arms, laughed so loudly strangers stared, and didn't care. Sometimes he took me to hidden beaches only he knew, where the waves smashed against rocks. Best teacher I ever had, he said, nodding to the ocean. And I thought, this man understands something no university or financial course could ever teach. His lightness infected me, and for the first time in years, I believed happiness could be simple. But at night, when he fell asleep beside me, shadows crept into my mind. Everything was too good, too fragile. My old voice whispered, "This won't last." I turned away from the thought, but it always returned. Even here, even in paradise, I knew happiness was something delicate, something that could break. One evening we sat quietly on the beach as the sun spread gold and pink across the sky. Liam tossed pebbles into the waves. I tried to memorize the colors, the sound of the water, his presence. That's when she appeared. A woman with long dark hair, walking confidently toward us. Her eyes flicked to me, sharp, assessing, before locking on to Liam. "Another new one?" she asked, her tone dripping with irony. Liam laughed awkwardly, avoiding her gaze, and in that moment something dark flickered between us. After that night, I saw her everywhere. At the surf school, sitting in the corner of the bar where we had dinner, even in the parking lot. Her eyes followed me, challenging me, silently saying, "He's not yours. You're just passing through." I tried to dismiss it, to laugh at myself for being paranoid, but jealousy crept under my skin like poison. I didn't know who she was, an ex, a fling, a ghost of his past. I didn't know if he had once whispered to her the same words he whispered to me. But for the first time that summer, the ground beneath me felt unsteady. My paradise was cracking. And I feared the cracks would widen into a chasm I could not cross. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. After all, Liam spent nearly all his time with me. He laughed with me, kissed me like I was the only woman in the world, showed me the places he loved most. But every time her eyes caught mine, a cold ache spread in my chest. One night, unable to bear it, I asked directly, "Who is she?" We sat in his van, the smell of coffee and sea salt filling the small space, waves roaring outside the windows. Liam sighed. "The past," he said. Just 2 words, but they hit me harder than any explanation could. I clenched my fists, waiting for more details, confessions, but he turned away to stare at the window. I fell silent, afraid of hearing more than I could handle. Yet images came anyway, the two of them walking the same beach, laughing around a bonfire, her hands where mine were now. Jealousy ate at me silently, even as I tried to smile. I had come here to breathe again, to recover, yet I found myself suffocating all over, only this time, not from work, but from love. And every time he whispered, "You're mine," a quiet voice inside me asked, "But are you really?" The carefree rhythm of my days began to crumble. I still laughed, still surfed, still lay in the sand with him, but beneath the surface I was restless. When Liam left to surf alone, I couldn't stop myself from wondering, would she be waiting? Would he meet her when I wasn't there? I despised myself for these thoughts. In my old life, jealousy was weakness. I never had time for feelings, only for victories and losses. But now jealousy coiled in me like smoke, choking me, and I couldn't stop it. One evening we went to a party with his friends. Music played, laughter echoed, and I tried to relax. Then she appeared. Her laughter was too loud, her touch on his shoulder too natural. I watched Liam smile politely, and my chest burned. Later that night, when we returned home, I couldn't hold it in. "Do you still love her?" I whispered. He froze, staring straight into my eyes, and said firmly, "Sophie, I'm with you." That should have been enough. But instead of comfort, his words only deepened my fear. They were too perfect, too precise. And I no longer knew if I could believe them. The days that followed were filled with silence. Not the warm silence we once shared on the beach, but a heavy silence, where unspoken questions hung between us like storm clouds. I laughed when I needed to, told jokes to seem lighthearted, but inside, a gap was widening. One morning Liam woke me early. "Come. I'll show you where I hide from the world." We climbed a narrow trail up the cliffs. When we reached the top, the view stole my breath, endless ocean, the sun rising out of the water, gulls wheeling above us. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "You're my shelter now." Tears filled my eyes. His words were exactly what I longed to hear. But then, in a flash, I thought of her. Had he told her the same? My heart twisted with doubt. I hated myself for the thoughts, for poisoning our happiness. Yet I couldn't stop. Standing there, I realized the most dangerous wave wasn't the one crashing against the rocks, it was the one rising inside me. I began searching for answers in the wrong places. In his words, in his gestures, even in his phone. I despised myself for it. This wasn't me. In New York, I would never have stooped so low. But here, I was no longer in control. Vulnerability turned me into someone I didn't recognize. One night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I picked up his phone. My hands shook. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Part of me wanted proof of betrayal, as if that would justify my fear. There was nothing, only a handful of messages from friends, photos of waves, and me, smiling at sunset. But that didn't soothe me. I knew the past wasn't erased from screens, it lived in the heart. The next day he looked at me differently, as if sensing my doubt. "You don't trust me," he said softly. I wanted to deny it, but the truth slipped out, "I'm afraid." He didn't argue. He just pulled me into his arms. And his silence was worse than any confession. Our summer split into two worlds. By day, we were still happy, surfing, laughing with friends, eating pizza on the beach. By night, I lay awake, listening to his even breathing, my heart pounding. I feared how easily it could all unravel. One evening, he took me to a party celebrating a surf competition. The place buzzed with energy, music, cheers. And of course, she was there. Her eyes found me immediately. But this time, instead of mockery, I saw something else, pity. As if she already knew I was fighting a battle I could not win. I left the party, fled to the shore, the ocean air stinging my lungs. Tears streamed down my face. Suddenly, I felt Liam's hand on my shoulder. "Sophie, what's wrong?" he asked. I turned to him, words spilling out, "I'm afraid you don't belong to me." He studied me, silent, then said quietly, "You don't understand. I don't belong to anyone." His voice was calm, but it shattered me. Because in that moment, I realized he was right. He belonged to the ocean, to freedom. And I was the one trying to chain his heart like a contract. After that party, something shifted between us. We still laughed, still surfed, still shared mornings with coffee on the sand, but a thin layer of frost lay beneath it all. His words, "I don't belong to anyone," echoed in my head at night. I tried to convince myself it meant freedom, that he wasn't tied to rules, that he lived beyond the expectations of the world I had fled. But each time I remembered the look in her eyes, I felt as though I stood on fragile ice. One morning, I asked outright, "Did you love her?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he nodded. "Yes." But that was before. That answer should have been enough. But inside, something cracked. I realized I wasn't fighting her presence in his life, I was fighting ghosts. Ghosts of memories, of feelings he once had, of a love I couldn't erase. In New York, I knew how to fight, with strategy, with numbers, with victories. But how do you fight a shadow? How do you compete with a memory? I smiled when he looked at me, but inside, the battle consumed me. Jealousy became my new job, except it paid nothing, only sleepless nights and a heart that trembled every time his eyes drifted into the distance. One morning Liam suggested driving to Los Angeles. "You need some city in your veins again, or the waves will drown you," he joked. We piled into his van, music blaring, the road stretching endlessly along the coast. His hand rested on my knee, the wind tangled my hair, and for a moment everything felt simple again. In Los Angeles, we went to a small bar where he knew the band. It was crowded, loud, chaotic. I already felt out of place, surrounded by strangers who seemed so at home in the noise. And then I saw her. She stood near the stage, laughing, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found us. Liam's expression changed instantly. Just for a moment, but I saw it, his smile dimmed, his eyes hardened. We left earlier than planned. He drove in silence. The tension pressed down on me until I couldn't bear it anymore. "You still feel something for her," I said finally. He slammed on the brakes, the van jerking to a stop on the side of the road. His eyes burned into mine. "Sophie, enough. I'm here with you. But if you keep living in her shadow, we won't survive." I wanted to argue, to deny, but deep down, I knew he was right. And yet I also knew, I couldn't just let go of my fear. My heart was torn between trust and suspicion. I wanted to believe Liam, to embrace his simplicity, his freedom. But my past, my nature, my obsession with control, none of it would let me go. One night we were at a bonfire with his friends. Everyone was singing, laughing, the firelight dancing across their faces. But I felt distant, my thoughts pulled elsewhere. I stood and walked down to the shoreline, craving solitude. Liam followed. "You're drifting again," he said. I snapped, the words spilling out like venom, "and you're hiding your past." The air between us crackled, and the fight exploded. He shouted that I never let him be himself, that I wanted to mold him into someone else. I shouted that I couldn't live under the shadow of another woman. Our words struck harder than any wave. When he turned and walked away into the night, leaving me alone on the beach, fear surged inside me. For the first time that summer, I realized how terrified I was of being left behind. The next day, he didn't come back. I waited for him at the beach, at his house, even at the surf school, but there was no sign of him. My hands shook as I typed message after message. No reply. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. My imagination tortured me. He had gone back to her, he had realized I was too complicated, he had tired of me. I paced in circles, unable to breathe, my body alive with panic. When the sun began to set, he finally appeared. Tanned, exhausted, a bottle of cheap wine dangling from his hand. "I went to the mountains. Needed to think," he said. I wanted to scream, to throw the bottle at him, to demand how he could vanish without a word. But instead, I collapsed against him, clinging to him as if he might disappear again. My anger dissolved under the warmth of his touch. And in that moment, I realized the truth, I was already too deep. I couldn't live without him. And that dependency terrified me more than anything else. We made peace, but the cracks remained. I started counting the days until the end of summer, punishing myself with the knowledge that time was running out. What would happen next? Could we really be together when I returned to New York? Could I stay here in his world forever? One evening, sitting by the ocean, I asked, "What happens after summer?" He didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, "I don't know. I never think that far ahead." His words hit me like a blow. I was a woman who built her life on plans, on forecasts, on guarantees. And he lived only in the present moment. That was what made him so free, and so dangerous to my heart. I stared at the waves, torn between two forces, the desperate desire to stay, to abandon everything for him, and the fear of losing myself in a world with no structure, no future, no promises. Deep inside, I knew my decision was coming. And it would shape not only the rest of our summer, but the rest of my life. I began to count not days but minutes. Each sunrise felt like a reminder, summer was ending. I tried to hide the storm inside me, not to spoil what was left, but my fear kept growing. One morning Liam went surfing early, leaving me alone on the terrace with my coffee. That's when she came. As if she knew the exact moment to strike. "Do you really think he's yours?" she asked, her voice calm, but her eyes gleaming with cruelty. I didn't answer. My fingers tightened around the mug so hard I burned myself. She smiled slowly. "You're just a season. He always comes back." Her words sliced through me like glass. When Liam returned, I said nothing. He hugged me, kissed my temple, and I forced a smile, but inside me a chill had taken root. That evening, as the waves crashed and he whispered promises against my skin, I felt frozen. For the first time since I arrived in Malibu, the urge to run was stronger than the urge to stay. I started withdrawing, from his friends, from parties, even from him. I couldn't face her eyes anymore, and I couldn't bear my own silence either. Liam noticed. "What's going on with you?" he asked again and again. I always said, "Nothing, I'm fine." But he knew. One night, he cornered me in the beach house, frustration burning in his gaze. "Sophie, you're not here anymore. Your body's here, but your mind is somewhere else. If you don't trust me, say it." I froze, words stuck in my throat. The truth was worse, I didn't distrust him, I distrusted myself. Could I live in a world without control, without guarantees? In New York, I thrived on certainty. Here, I had only his smile and the waves, things that could vanish at any moment. That night our argument exploded. I shouted that I couldn't keep living under her shadow. He shouted that I didn't understand him, that I wanted to mold him into something he wasn't. His words stung like fire. I stormed out into the night, walking along the beach, cold sand under my feet, waves crashing against my legs, tears streaming down my face. The next day he was gone. His van stood empty, his surfboards missing, his phone silent. I sat on the terrace, staring at the road, waiting. My mind spiraled, he had gone to her, he had finally realized I was too much, too heavy. Panic gnawed at me until I could barely breathe. I even pictured myself packing my suitcase, booking a flight home. It was all a mistake, I whispered to myself. But my heart screamed the opposite. When evening fell, he appeared. Tanned, exhausted, carrying a bottle of cheap wine. I went to chase big waves. "Needed to clear my head," he said. I wanted to scream at him, to hit him, to demand how he could vanish without a word. But when I looked into his tired eyes, all I could do was collapse against his chest and sob. He stroked my hair, whispering over and over, "You're mine. Only mine." And I believed him. Even though deep inside, I knew those words alone couldn't save us from the storm building on the horizon. We tried to find balance again. We drove along the coast, laughed, surfed together, shared pizza at sunset. But a shadow lingered. I grew quieter, my smiles less steady. He grew restless, his energy jagged. One night, at another party, I saw her again. Standing apart, her gaze fixed on him with an unbearable certainty. The look of someone who believed she still held his heart. I snapped. Pulling Liam aside, I said sharply, "If you don't end this, I'll leave." He blinked at me as if I'd said something absurd. "Sophie, I'm with you." But it wasn't enough. I wanted clarity, public declaration, proof. I wanted him to tell everyone she was nothing but the past. But he didn't. At home, our argument flared hotter than ever. I screamed that I couldn't go on like this. He screamed that I was trying to change him, cage him, strip away who he was. His words cut, because maybe he was right. I loved him, but I hated him too, for tearing down the rules I lived by without giving me new ones to follow. After that night, silence settled like a wall between us. Short phrases, empty gestures, nothing more. I walked the beach alone, he surfed with his friends. We lay side by side at night, but it felt like miles stretched between us. I could feel summer slipping away, and I didn't know which was worse, losing him now or dragging this ache back to New York with me. One afternoon, he finally spoke. "Sophie, you have to decide. Can you accept me as I am, without plans, without promises, without guarantees? Because I can't become the man you're trying to make me." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. I looked at him, realizing he spoke the truth. This was the moment of choice. Stay in his world of freedom and uncertainty, or return to my world of order and control. My throat closed, I couldn't answer. Because the truth was, my fear was stronger than my love. And still, deep down, I knew this choice would define more than just our summer. It would define my entire life. I woke before dawn. Liam was asleep beside me, his arm draped over my waist, his breathing steady, his face calm, as if the world could never touch him. I lay there, memorizing every line of his face, wanting to stop time and keep him forever like this. But in my mind, New York was already calling. Meetings. Deadlines. My other life, the one I had left behind but not erased, was waiting. I slipped quietly out of bed and stepped onto the terrace. The ocean crashed against the shore, a relentless reminder that nothing lasts. I held my phone in my hand, the airline app open. My fingers trembled. With one touch, I could buy a ticket back. Within a day, I could be gone. But was that really home anymore? Could I step back into the life that had nearly destroyed me? When Liam came outside, I quickly hid my phone. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pressing his lips to my shoulder. "You're far away again," he whispered. I forced a smile, but tears burned my eyes. That day we drove into the mountains. Liam said he wanted to show me the place where he felt the most free. We hiked a narrow trail, my lungs burning as he teased me about my office stamina. When we reached the top, the view opened before us, an endless ocean stretching to forever, sunlight spilling across the waves. He sat beside me, his eyes glowing. "This is why I can't live any other way," he said. "Freedom is all I have." I looked at him, and my heart ached, because my truth was different. My world thrived on stability, on plans, on control. We belonged to two separate realities. "And if I can't?" I asked softly. He didn't answer at first. Then he took my hand, squeezed it, and said, "I'm not asking you to change. I only want you here, now. Nothing else matters." His words were beautiful, but I knew they weren't enough. Because for me, everything mattered. I couldn't silence the voice inside me that demanded answers. And that voice was tearing us apart. Summer was slipping away. Each morning I woke with a bittersweet thought, one more day, one more chance to capture him, to etch him into my memory forever. But fear grew heavier with each sunrise. One evening, we sat by a bonfire with his friends. They laughed and sang, and he strummed his guitar, his voice mixing with the crackle of fire. I wanted to freeze the moment, to hold it in my hands like glass. But when he looked at me, I saw something in his eyes that frightened me. He knew, too. This was the end. Later, we walked along the shoreline. The air was heavy, the waves restless. I finally said it aloud, "I'm afraid that when summer ends, so will we." He stopped, turned, and looked at me with gentle defiance. "Or maybe we just stay together as long as we can. Why do you always think about tomorrow?" His simplicity pierced me. I couldn't live in "as long as we can." I wanted forever. And that difference split my heart in two. The final days of summer felt like a long farewell. We still laughed, still surfed, still kissed under the stars. But each touch, each smile, carried the taste of goodbye. One night, I woke and found Liam sitting on the terrace, smoking, staring at the dark ocean. "What happens next?" I asked. He stayed silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "I don't know. But I know this, you changed me. You taught me to see deeper." I walked to him, wrapped my arms around his shoulders, and whispered, "And you taught me to let go." We sat like that, listening to the ocean. I knew then, my heart would always remain here, even if my body returned to New York. But I also knew I couldn't stay. I belonged to another world, to a life of schedules and deadlines. And that truth cut me in half. The last day. I stood beside his van with my suitcase, staring at the waves, trying to breathe in every sound, every scent, to carry them back with me. Liam stood silent at my side. We didn't speak of goodbyes, words were too small for what was breaking inside us. I touched his face, traced the curve of his jaw, and whispered, "I'll never forget you." He smiled that easy smile of his, the one that had undone me from the start, and said, "And I'll never ask you to." We embraced, long and fierce, holding each other as if we could hold back time. Then I stepped into the taxi. Through the window, the ocean blurred, the van shrank, and he faded into the distance. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but deep inside, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A beginning of me, new, different. I was returning to New York, but not as the same woman who had left. Life might fall back into routine, but I carried something no schedule could erase. Somewhere in Malibu, there was a man who had taught me to release control, to stop fighting, to listen to the wave. And for the rest of my life, whenever the world tried to drown me, I would remember his voice, "Don't fight. Listen to the wave."